Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Books for Believers. We're excited to bring to you Cat's Cradle this month, which is far less obscure than our previous pick, but hopefully this will be a fan favorite. It's certainly one of our shared favorites. Not only the author, Kurt Vonnegut, who is just fantastic, but this book really just goes to the some wonderful depth in its philosophy, but also some absurd fringes in its comedy. So I hope you enjoy it as much as we have.
Well, like we said, we are here with Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle. This is in competition for the best known of Kurt Vonnegut's works. And just to get you introduced to the background of this book, we'll give you a short plot synopsis. But I will warn you, as a modern or even postmodern novel and one of a somewhat adventurous artistic style, plot is not actually the most important point in this book. It's almost a vehicle for him to move his weird ideas and his worldview forward. So just be warned, if you do pick up the book and you wonder why plot isn't really driving it, that's why. It's sort of the postmodern piece of it. Nevertheless, this is about the author, the narrator, who is essentially going on this journey following one of the people who invented the atomic bomb and finding out that his life was very weird, his family was very weird, and that brings him into this secondary location of this island. And in the island kingdom, all of these philosophies and ideas wind up getting played out in almost the sense of some kind of parable. So it's an exciting book. It's an interesting book. It's a very, very, above all, a very funny book, and it's filled with humor and really joy in that way. Also, filled with things that you wouldn't expect from a narrative, and some things that we might even find a little bit inappropriate. So, as we move forward into this month of these discussions, I would ask, what was your plot encounter with this, Dane?
Sorry, my plot encounter.
hmm Yeah, how did the plot like impact you or affect you as you were reading it?
Oh. Well, like you said, it just kind of hangs in the background. You're following this reporter, and he's trying to piece together this story, and at the same time, you're trying to piece together the story. And he's dropping these little hints, which are striking usually because of their absurdity. But at the same time, you can tell it's like he's returning to themes, he's playing on them, he's building them up, and he's using a sort of dark humor, although this is certainly not as darkly humorous as his other works,
Definitely.
which even those, he brings that dark humor into a light space. So it's never heavy, but he's dealing with some incredibly heavy subjects. This is at least one of two, if not one of three, that I can think of his works where he's dealing with the issues of war and in this one more the atomic bomb
Mm,
and the danger that that poses to the world of atomic winter, I think is what he's kind of playing on here.
yeah.
And so leave it to Kurt Vonnegut to be able to write an apocalyptic fiction and to put it in a package that is just delightful to. And I think the plot, as much as it just hangs in the background, that's really what strings you along and keeps you moving through to the end because you want to see what happens with this family that we're following, and then the gentleman who lands uh, in the southern reaches.
Yeah. Well, and again, because Vonnegut's books are so wonderfully and intellectually challenging in this way, they just don't follow the normal kind of method of delivering information. But he really was a unique character. He was born in 1922 in Indianapolis, so he's kind of a good Midwestern guy, and was a World War II veteran, being captured during the Battle of the Bulge and witnessing the firebombing of Dresden, rather, which was a major influence on his life. So he is struggling in what we'd call kind of this postmodernist, early postmodernist worldview, dealing with all the meaning, despair, and using satire as a way to look at that. And in fact, his other most famous book, Slaughterhouse-Five, was, I think, the only anti-war book successful in its real message. It's kind of funny to say that, but the reality is it's hard to make war look anything less than cool. right? It's dangerous. Someone's fighting. Everyone believes they're fighting for the right side and they're conquering evil. Inevitably, you're going to make war sound cool and or interesting or valuable. And so he writes a book that, again, regardless of your opinions on war, I think we can all say we don't like it, but he's able to write in a way that certainly criticizes, at least if not war itself, the things that motivate us to, and the things it motivates us to do. And so I think that's a big part of this. And part of it is just for us not really understanding what it was like for those generations that saw the first atomic bomb drop, that saw cities leveled, and realized the threat that was that weighed heavily on people's minds. Just the thought that someone might be crazy enough to level their whole town, their whole state, their whole country at a word.
So in moving our focus from Shirley Jackson or from Flannery O'Connor last month now to Kurt Vonnegut, we have a very deeply entrenched Americana author. But he really does come from a different region of the United States, and that plays well in his writing, where we've got Flannery dealing with some issues of religion and politics and all this sort down in the deep South. Now we've got a man dealing with some of the issues of career and family and life in his World War II era um, uh, novel here that's going to take us, of course, to far-flung regions where Wiseblood kept us very isolated in this one little town. Uh, but they both deal with some of the absurdities of religion too, especially when mankind kind of takes the reins and starts driving the religion. And so, while we've got a very successful discussion, I think, on the dangers of war, he's not leaving it at that. It's not just simply a book that deals with the threat of nuclear winter, but he drives it even further and weaves religion into this as well. And so, how did you encounter Bacanism or Baconanism, however we pronounce that?
See, I adored Baconanism, and I think it's important that we recognize that as we encounter, especially secular or secularized authors, talking about religion, we have to remember that it's very infrequent for them to be really discussing anything like the biblical faith. They really are criticizing very frequently the exact things that we would criticize. That is man-made religion or manipulation through religion. Even if some of the dogmas are correct, this use of religion to manipulate, or even the Christian faith to manipulate, we have to recognize as a reality. And so he invents this tremendously hilarious tool to poke fun at religion by creating this Baconanism, which is founded by a sort of mysterious figure, right? As we often see with man-made religions, a mysterious figure has achieved some kind of enlightenment, but his enlightenment really is postmodernism, and that's that all religions are a lie, even this one, right? So it's takes itself very unseriously, and yet winds up being a very kind of serious way to get through life from a postmodern standpoint. So I view it as postmodernism turned into a set of aphorisms, poems, and religious texts, and then kind of breathed out into the reader as the writer's actual philosophy, even though he recognizes in good postmodern fashion that it's ridiculous, and he knows it is as well. But that's how he's getting through. So what was your encounter with it?
Well, I agree, and I think that is one of the unique values of Kurt Vonnegut
Mm,
is that he is more than willing to poke fun at himself just as much as he's poking fun at everyone else.
mm,
He's a pretty honest guy too. While we probably wouldn't agree with a lot of his worldviews and philosophies, we could probably have a very profitable discussion with this guy.
mm.
Not only because he's hilarious, but because he takes himself lightly, but he understands the depth and the seriousness of the issues that he has on his plate. And so, in dealing with this postmodernism in this post-World War II era where everything seems sort of detached and frayed from the old world that even probably his grandparents and great grandparents had grown up in. Um, we have him entering into a world that he doesn't really know what the future looks like, and he doesn't have a worldview that's robust enough to handle that. And it kind of leaves you with that frozen future kind of view of what might happen um, when you've become untethered in time, perhaps to grab a reference from another book of
Yeah,
his.
that's right.
Unstuck in time, unstuck in.
Unstuck in time. That's exactly right. Well, and I think that's what makes his perspective in these books so interesting and so valuable. When he's writing, most people were looking with hopeful optimism towards what technology was going to do, what it was going to provide us. Was, is it flying cars? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the end of disease or sickness? Or perhaps through technology we can end world hunger or even end the need to war, right? Like for war, there's this really strange kind of, as a Christian, we would say an eschatological kind of kingdom perspective or desire as to what technology was going to bring, where maybe their perspective, religion or politics or whatever it is, had failed. And so Vonnegut gives us a really interesting perspective, again, especially from that atheistic standpoint, by saying, yeah, technology might make some things better, but it's not making things better because we're
Mhm.
still of the type of people that will kill each other or destroy the world just to kill each other. In other words, if you can't, or if I can't have it, then no one can have it. So it may as well, again, blow up everything. It's become this zero-sum game. And how did that happen? Well, the weaponization of technology. I mean, people use technology for various purposes, but usually the biggest advances come because guy A wanted to kill guy B or protect what he had from guy B. So he gives us an alternate secular viewpoint with eyes wide open, interestingly cautioning against technology, whereas other authors would have said, oh, yeah, we want to get rid of all that religion and belief, and we want to instead embrace the materialism of the scientific world.
Mhm. Well, and that I think kind of is the oddity about how he handles this is the religion is really the lightest element here, and it's the thing that kind of eases the tension of of everything else going on. And of course, some of it is just some of the weird customs that this religion um, engages in. Uh, but it is the satirical release valve on this post-nuclear world, and he's invented this concept or this thing called Ice Nine for the purposes of his narration. And I think what he's doing is exactly what you said. He's showing the human nature and the ability that we have to move forward without really learning much. And so I think he's using it as an opportunity to show man's need for simply responsibility. We've got this world. It's the only one we've got. Although, I don't know, Sirens of Titan, he might argue differently. Uh, it's the only one we've got. The people around us are the only ones we've got. And whether there's religion or not, we have a responsibility to take care of the people around us and not to act irresponsibly. And I think that really is the moral that he's trying to drive here is perhaps even religion aside, we're acting foolishly.
hmm Yeah, and it's really kind of fascinating because through Book, what is it we call it? Bokononism? I always want to say
Kanan,
Bokononism because that just sounds
well,
like
Akhenaten is the creator. These
that's right. So this religion that he develops is really kind of a fascinating and poetic thing. He even uses Bakononism or Bakanon to take, biblical truths and adapt them, or at least reword them to be a little bit more in his voice, but at the same time to recognize this. So it really does again show that postmodern perspective, the idea that, well, we can't know everything, therefore we probably can't really trust anything that we know. Therefore, again, let's just be nice to each other, right? Like none of it matters. And so I think that this is most clearly played out when they get to this small island kingdom, which is of course imaginary, Do you remember the name of the kingdom? It's uh, oh, it'll come to me. It's not Las Palmas. That's a place in California. Anyway, so they come to this island kingdom that has a dictator and who very clearly is modeled after the various kind of banana republic dictators known in Central America, kind of throughout modern history. And yet this one has outlawed Buchananism. He is going to make a Christian nation wherein both Protestantism and Catholicism are illegal, but he's going to make a Christian nation. And so your author is, or our author, our narrator, the reporter, is experiencing this and all the reactions around him. And he finds out that Buchananism is illegal. And not only is it illegal, it's punishable by death. And so anyone caught doing anything Buchananist is going to be punished by the hook, right? So they're going to be like, it basically impaled upon a hook, as I took that, right? A fishing hook
Mhm.
and just kind of hung out to die.
Very Polynesian.
Very
And
Polynesian.
the island is San Lorenzo.
San Lorenzo, thank you very much. Yes, San Lorenzo. So it's funny. It's hilarious as we read through. We're trying not to spoil here, but so he comes in and hears about and reads about Buchananism, and yet when he's greeted by the dictator of this island called Papa, which is again it just smacks of all this great kind of banana republic history that we're so used to, or even maybe creating some of those stereotypes for us. But he opposes Buchananism with absolute fury. And there's even a wonderful interview with a cab driver where, they say, "Hey, is anybody Buchananist?" "Oh, nobody's that stupid." Well, and so you get this dialogue that's very kind of tongue in cheek because what you find out through the course of the novel is that everybody's Buchananist and they just won't admit to it in front of Papa because he'll have them killed. But we don't actually have record that they actually killed anybody. It's the big joke of the illusions of power and authority and control and what we're willing to say or condemn. And of course, it comes to its, uh, zenith when Papa finally comes to his deathbed. And what does he want? Well, he wants people to come in and give him the Buchananist death rights. So, yeah, I thought that was a stunning kind of it wasn't really a critique, but a stunning portrayal of how things work in terms of what we publicly condemn and what we privately maybe even need or permit in some way.
Mhm. No, and of course, we're dealing with a made-up religion that is not the biblical faith, but it kind of it could almost work in the favor of a postmodernist, anti-Christian context of just saying, like it felt like a deathbed conversion or a confession, at least, of, yeah, this is really the thing that I've thought or believed all along. It's the thing that makes the most sense to me. And when when I'm in these final moments, that's the comfort I have.
Mm.
Now, of course, and I think simply because we are both pastors, we have to always add in that caveat. We know not true, and it's a ridiculous religion. But at the same time, we see that Kurt Vonnegut, this unreligious fellow, is still recognizing and drawing out the natural human inclination and need for something to worship and some worldview to organize the world around him. We just happen to have one that is flawless in the Christian worldview. And I
Mm.
say that unapologetically. While he is trying desperately to disallow a divine foot in the door, and trying to paint religion as absurd, what he's actually done is shown the human need for um, for deity,
Yeah, faith. Well, sorry, not just faith, the act of believing
relationship.
something. Yeah, a relationship with the divine. So I really thought that this was interesting as we get to that kind of pinnacle moment when it comes to the spirituality element, wherein the dying papa or leader wants to get this right, and so the doctor who also doesn't believe in God is the one who administrates or doesn't believe in Bokononism is the one who administers this, and he goes on and gives his essentially a statement that sometimes things are more important than truth because as a scientist he should never do it, but as a human being he is willing to do this. Nevertheless, there's a kind of a liturgy of it, so I won't read the repetition, but suffice to say, this is the liturgy that was made up for men to, or for the death ceremony, if you like. First of all, you have to note that but in Buchananism, you commune with others by pressing your feet, your bare feet together. And before we even go into this, I would love to know what your thoughts on this. Because I mean, obviously, there's the wordplay. The soles of your feet means that by touching feet, you're touching souls. You're making a soul connection. So there's a humorousness to it, and I think there's also a backwardness to it in that we usually, when we meet, we shake hands, right? And we might hug, but this idea of kind of intertwining your feet in one way or the other as being this utmost religious intimacy. What did you think of that?
It is unexpectedly intimate sounding.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing that struck me as I read that first and then read it again and then read it a third time just to make sure that's actually what he said. Because this was only my second introduction to Kurt Vonnegut. And Slaughterhouse-Five was not like this.
No.
Like these are two totally different kinds of books. And so the absurdity of this was a bit elevated, but it almost makes you feel shy to talk about it. There's nothing intimate about a foot.
Right.
And yet it's this, I don't know, perhaps part of your body that's usually covered and you don't talk to or talk about to other people. And so I think it's just one of these absurd ways that he has a tendency to do. And I've noticed it as I've read more of his work, that he finds these ironic parallels where it's like, well, it could have been this way, but it's not.
Mm.
But in my book, it's going to be. Uh,
Right.
and so I don't know. I think it's just this quirky thing that he does. I'm assuming he does it for comedy purposes more than anything else, but it reflects that nature of God. I think that in made in the image of God, we're creators. We
Hmm.
organize, we design, and as he's taking the reins of his story, he's creating this world and he's creating all the little intricacies and weirdnesses about it.
Mm.
One of those things that just makes it's one of the beautiful things about a creator, and it's one of these things that we've been given the capacity for.
Mm. Well,
I
I,
love that.
I think he also it points out the arbitrariness, particularly of man-made religion, right? When we talk about the reality of what God reveals in His Word, there's I would say nothing arbitrary about it. You know, faith in Jesus Christ alone for salvation because Jesus Christ paid for sin and made a meaningful sacrifice in order to bring us safely back to himself and to bring us to forgiveness. There's nothing spare about that. That is philosophically satisfying. That explains the nature and problem of evil in the world. I mean, there's just so much to it. But what happens when men get a hold of it? Well, we turn it into a rather arbitrarily held oftentimes, sometimes because things have meaning or they're meant to have meaning, but we add arbitrary bells and whistles on. We have to say this at this point. We have to do this. We have to ring this bell. We have to light this incense. Whatever it is, we are of a nature, even when our faith doesn't command us to put these kind of bells and whistles on, the arbitrary reality of what, religious people do. Well, it's about wearing this hat. It's about wearing, it's the guy who wears this robe or the incense has to be in this special incensory, whatever incense holder.
The human need for ritual.
The human need for ritual. And so this identifies that. And so anyway, as we get back to this, one of these rituals I just thought was very profound in something that will become quite obvious as we read it. So again, I'm not going to read in the context of how it's written. The doctor is saying the words and the supplicant is repeating them. I'll just read them once. God made mud. God got lonesome. God said to some of the mud, sit up. See all I've made, said God, the hills, the sea, the sky, the stars. And I was some of the mud that got up to sit up and look around. Lucky me, lucky mud. I, mud, sat up and saw what a nice job God had done. Nice going, God. But nobody but you could have done it, God. I certainly couldn't have. I feel very unimportant compared to you. The only way I can feel the least bit important is to think of all the mud that didn't even get to sit up and look around. I got so much, and mud got so little. And then thank you very much, basically. And it kind of, oh, thank you for the honor. Sorry, thank you for the honor. Now Mud lies down and goes to sleep. What memories for Mud to have? What interesting other kinds of sitting up Mud I met? And it goes on from there. I won't finish it, but what parallels do you see in that?
I think that in his attempts to create an absurd religion that is detached from others, he has necessarily followed the pattern of worship, of worldview that we just can't escape in this world because the biblical worldview is truly how things came to be. And this is what we find all around the world is there are traces of the memory of Genesis 1 through 11 in every culture, in every religion, because that's the foundation and the base of it all.
Mm, yeah. And I think it's fascinating, and this is very important, both as we look at man-made religions and even as at atheism, is that we have to remember that they're always stealing from God,
Mhm.
right? I mean, this is essentially a retelling of Genesis chapters 1 and 2 with a very tongue-in-cheek
Mhm.
tone to it. And it's obviously sounds like it's sardonic and irreverent, for sure. But the reality is that there was just nothing better to work with than this idea that, yeah, God created man and has a relationship unique with him, and he has a unique relationship with the rest of creation, right? Man, that is.
Mhm.
And
But the,
so I thought it was a really profound, little section to point out that, when Kurt Vonnegut, this kind of atheistic, postmodern, he's too cool to believe in anything. And I think that's part of what makes his writing so weak thematically, is that he's just too cool to commit even to the communism that he wants to claim is going to be the answer, right? So you don't ever, at least I never found him to be even slightly convincing towards what he wanted to communicate. However, the things that he didn't mean to communicate were very passionate, powerful in that regard.
yeah, he often does a much better job of criticizing than actually offering any valid solutions.
Hmm.
But I think that's because he often dismisses the valid solution while criticizing some of its weaknesses.
Mm,
Uh, but I can't remember if it's C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien who said all stories are simply a retelling of the story.
mm,
And as humans, we just can't get away from that.
mm,
And what makes a creative writer is not necessarily trying to distance yourself so far from it, but rather in presenting reality in in uh, a creative and engaging package that really opens up truth and draws you closer to it rather than trying to push you further away from it.
mm.
And Vonnegut often accidentally does that, but because he is just an honest writer, like he is dealing with some of the issues tongue in cheek that others just won't deal with.
Yeah.
And so it kind of feels sometimes like Oscar Wilde, where he sets out with one intention and one goal and one purpose, but in his honesty, he actually undercuts his own argument.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting now that I realize this, that really we seem to be attracted to rather satirical and sarcastic authors so far in this discussion, which is maybe just a part of any
We're
good.
only to it. We're
What's
only
that?
to it.
Yeah, exactly. We're only two in, but we did choose two very sarcastic books to start with. Well, so I'd be interested to know. I mean, we've got these kind of plot basics covered. The Ice Nine as so Ice Nine is an invention actually of Dr. Felix Honecker, who's the person whom the reporter is seeking to do this report on initially, that gets him kind of brought into this. Felix Honecker is a fictional co-creator of the atomic bomb, and we find that after the atomic bomb that he made an even more destructive creation called Ice Nine. And Ice Nine, of course, fictional, is a invention that, at a crystal could be dropped into water, and all that water and all the water connected to that is turned to ice. And I love this thematically because the military kind of hears about this, or at least hears about it in theory, and says, "This is fantastic. We could have people trying to travel through us, or soldiers trying to travel through a swamp, and they drop some ice nine, and then all of a sudden it's firm ground, and they can get across way faster." And the argument against that, which was beautiful, not argument against it, the author questioning him says, wouldn't that water be connected to other water? And wouldn't that water be connected to, in other words, you'd bring about a total apocalypse of ice everywhere because eventually all the water is going to touch some more water. And I think that he's showing the absolute stupidity of the materialistic mind. Because in order to solve a little problem, in order to, to figure out how to make this little mouse do what I want it to do, I have to shrink my entire mind and world down to this without any reference to what's going on beyond it to solve this little problem about how to make this do what I want it to do. And what you don't realize, and what science never realizes, is the greater connection and impact for what they've done. And it's funny because this is a theme that's around since Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, right? But probably certainly long before that. But the idea, or really, right? I mean, the Faustian bargain. I mean, there's just a lot of ways we could look at this. But the reality is that irresponsibility that seeks to solve a problem in the short term, whether that's killing the bad guy or curing cancer, it's going to ultimately be impossible to guess what the repercussions of that will be, and thus makes uh, Felix Honecker makes two world-ending inventions in one lifetime, and he's insane to boot, of course.
Well, I I simply love that. And I think that because this book really was one that launched his career into the public sphere in a way that others didn't. Slaughterhouse-Five, I think, is his most famous.
Mhm.
But Cat's Cradle flew off the shelves because it occurred during, or it was published during the Bay of Pigs
Yeah.
debacle. And so everyone has at the peak of their mind these fears over nuclear war. And that really was the big question back when the nuclear bomb was being created was do we know what the chain reaction of this is going to be? Do
Mm,
we understand what happens when we split an atom that splits another atom that splits another atom with all this power? Where does it stop?
mm.
Is it going to stop? And so when they ignited the first nuclear bomb, they did not know.
Yeah. Just taking a guess.
No, I didn't. I've of course getting this from Hollywood because I watched Oppenheimer and loved it.
Hmm.
But that's the big question, right? You're about to try this for the very first time. How big is it going to be? We have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could be right here ending the whole world.
Mm.
And yet, the drive forward for progress, for innovation, for invention of a weapon that can just destroy more efficiently, um, that outweighed the concern for the world itself. But this is another thing that I love about Vonnegut, but I'm not sure I'm in great company because this is going to sound terrible. I hate it when the hero actually wins at the end of a movie. Like we all have the joke, of course, Americans always save the world and China always saves China. But sometimes it's a little anticlimactic when you're being promised this this big destruction. I don't know, a meteor's gonna destroy the Earth, and Bruce Willis and his friends go and stop it from destroying the Earth. You never actually get that impact.
Right.
Kurt Vonnegut, in all of his books, scratches that itch.
Hmm.
You get what's promised. But in doing this in an apocalyptic setting, I think he shows the futility of his worldview versus the robustness of the Christian worldview because not only does the Christian worldview offer a beginning to evil and an end to evil, but it offers a solution and a resolution to that. Uh, Cat's Cradle doesn't. But if this were your worldview and this is what you're looking for as a solution to life and hope, you won't find it. It's a fun ride,
Mm.
but uh, reading the book of Revelation is going to give you hope. Um, might not be as fun a ride, but it's a glorious climax to history. And this kind of reminds me of um, the old. I think it's a poem. I'm going to sound very ignorant not knowing this, but this is how the world ends.
Mm.
Not with a bang, but with a whimper. I think it is.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, I mean, that was certainly the theme in The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. He's got this kind of like big arc of the world kind of evolving and then de-evolving into nothing. And I think that's really the secularist eschatology, is that eventually life just ends,
Mhm.
right? So, and that's certainly what Vonnegut is dealing with. And I think it's a good segue into our Christian takeaways from this. Obviously, we've only been able to cover so much, especially considering we didn't want to drop a bunch of spoilers. for this book. But um, yeah, Cat's Cradle critiques human pride, false hope in science, and false religion. And I really think that this is one of the powerful points is that any system, any human system, apart from the truth of Christ, is inevitably going to become a pretty miserable situation for all, right? So I think that there's a welcomeness for all of us, especially as Christians reading Cat's Cradle, to be able to say that even even again, many non-believers can connect with the hopelessness of human pride and the false hope of science, false religion, or government, right? We can all recognize, hopefully, again, and even Vonnegut struggled with this as he tried to find any answer to the problem, which he never really, like you said, he's way better at identifying problems than he is putting forth any solution. In fact, like most secularists, the best he can do is kind of limp-wristed, well, shouldn't we be nice to each other? Yeah, we should be nice to each other. But that's not
Mhm.
a solution, right? How do we get people to be nice to each other? That's a bigger issue. So um, I
Yeah,
think,
but even he critiques. I mean, God bless you, Mr. Rosewater. Um, that's quite a critique of altruism, I
yeah,
think.
it is. It absolutely is. And I think it
Even
kind
his solutions. The next book he comes out with critiques his solution for the last one.
of, right. Well, that's it. Because I think he recognizes that the shallowness of that answer simply isn't applicable, right? It's a lovely bedtime story or fairy story for um, non-believers, but it's in the end nothing less than a fairy story. It's imaginary, it's ridiculous, it's absurdist in the greater scope of things. And like you said, God bless you, Elliot Rosewater is a wonderful, or Mr. Rosewater, right? Is a wonderful critique, just like The Idiot, just like what was the other one that we read or have on our list about a fool that can't survive in society. Oh, I have to remember. We got another one that's in that ilk to talk about. So, yeah. So, what Christian takeaways do you have from Cat's Cradle?
Well, again, I appreciate his honesty and this exposure from a secularist of the secular worldview. But I think really what he offers us is the final solution of man-made religion isn't going to solve your problems. The religion of science is not going to solve your problems. And so he leaves the door wide open for a solution. And I'm somewhat thankful that he doesn't try to provide those solutions because the solutions he does provide are weak.
Hmm.
But we live in a world in which that solution is present um, on every street corner, pretty much. Um, we have grown up in a Christian nation, thankfully, and it's not very hard to find somebody who has trusted in the solution. And so I'm glad we don't live in the world of Kurt Vonnegut, but I enjoy visiting once in a while, uh, just to shine a light on my own worldview. And for one, it strengthens, but it also helps to chisel and to refine and to make sure that I'm not wandering off into some absurdities, but that I'm actually being critical of the worldview that I'm operating on, because it's not easy to be as honest as Kurt is about the flaws in your own philosophy and your own conclusions based on your worldview.
Hmm. Absolutely. So the book again is Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. It is a very short read and it is a very funny read if you can maintain a light sense of humor and realize that, as one comedian says, there's a lot of things that he says that he doesn't believe either. He's just saying them to be funny. And other times he's being very incisive. And it's a very enjoyable perspective and helpful for helping us see how the secularist worldview continued to evolve or maybe even devolve through the loss of certainty and the loss of faith in things like government, man-made religion, and systems of scientific progress or science in general, finding out that those weren't solutions that were going to meaningfully impact the real problems of humanity. Cat's Cradle's your book. It's worth a read. It's worth a look. So as we close up, Dane, if someone enjoyed Cat's Cradle, what other books might you recommend for them?
Well, I'd say certainly if you enjoyed the absurdity and somewhat of the the Polynesian vibe here in Cat's Cradle. Definitely grab a copy of Galapagos. Uh, it's one that delivers on its promises, but in some unexpected ways. Basically, it's an evolutionary farce where humanity devolves into simpler and simpler beings just to survive. But it's kind of more of a biological outworking of Cat's Cradle's spiritual despair, where humanity's supposed progress really only leads to extinction and regression. So it echoes that collapse of the rational and scientific pride. Sirens of Titan, which is perhaps my favorite Vonnegut so far. It's a cosmic scale satire of meaninglessness, where in Cat's Cradle, Ice Nine is the main culprit. Um in Sirens, all human history kind of turns out to be orchestrated by aliens. And you find this very early on in the book, so it's not really um, uh, a spoiler. But it's all because this one alien's spaceship broke down and needed another, and they needed a supply line. So all this cosmic whatnot. So it's an attempt to answer the question, why are we even here? Um, and once again, he just points out the absurdity of the secularist worldview. He drives it to its logical conclusion and finds it to be absolutely untenable. Sirens, a wonderful and hilarious book, and it takes Cat's Cradle up a notch.
Outstanding. Yes, and I would say we've already mentioned it, but if you like his style, Slaughterhouse-Five is absolutely a must read. It is the book that you're most likely to encounter when talking about um, Vonnegut from a literary perspective or from a collegiate perspective or something like that. This follows Billy Pilgrim, the aptly named person who goes and is essentially affected by PTSD or shell shock, whatever they were calling it at the time, but and then you're kind of brought into this mind twisting possibility that perhaps the science fiction world that he's drifting between is real or possibly is, just all in his head because of the tremendous trauma even done upon him by living through the bombing of Dresden. So, a really interesting book. Again, a fun, funny, satirical book that can be shocking at times. Also, if you like this, that element of it, 1984 is certainly a worthwhile read to, again, hopefully you're very familiar with that idea, but it's kind of in the same idea of science fiction being used as a tool to critique real social dangers and things that might be considered, more or less interesting as a result. Additionally, Brave New World kind of holds this place as well. So lots of great books to read in this ilk if you are interested in more reading there. Our next episode is going to be on the short story "The Possibility of Evil" by Shirley Jackson, and really, Dane, you're the guy to introduce us to that. So what can we expect in the next episode?
Well, in the next episode, we're going back to small town America, and we're going to encounter, I think, someone that we all know. Uh, we might not want to admit it, and perhaps
Or
it might be
Pete.
us.
Yeah.
But Shirley is going to introduce us to someone that every small town has, and bring us into her life and her mind and the way that it works. And it's a challenging but hilarious bit of dark humor. Again, apparently we're picking all the dark humor. We'll get into some deeper stuff later, but the possibility of evil starts to tip over that edge of we're really going to dig in on some of the human condition and how it doesn't always work out very well for us. This was proclaimed by Shirley's husband to be her greatest piece of work that she ever wrote. So I hope you all enjoy it.
Hmm. Absolutely. So find your copy or find a version of The Possibility of Evil, which can this be found searched for online, or is there a specific volume you have to pick up?
It's available online. I think the New Yorker has a published version of it for free online.
Nice. Outstanding. Well, again, thank you for joining us for a discussion of Cat's Cradle. We hope as believers you keep on reading to know more about God's creatures, about the society and worldview that we live in, and about how to share the love and light of Christ in that context, fully aware of all that God is doing with us, having put us in this place, in this time, for that reason. May God bless you, and we'll see you next time on Books for Believers.